Okay, here's a SketchUp model I made of our HBC stage apparatus. I'm gonna take this apart and build it one piece at a time for you guys so you can kind of see what we're gonna do as we build this thing. So it starts with 4 stage pieces. They're 4 by 8 feet, so we have 8 feet of depth and 16 feet of width here. And what we do is we start with these 2 by 4 base plates. These are just 2 by 4s, cut at 8 feet or purchased at 8 feet, 96 inches. And they're gonna be what holds the whole structure down to the stage. We'll bring C-clamps, at least 4 or 5 C-clamps on each side, and we're gonna cramp this thing down onto this aluminum stage. And then what we'll do is we'll put these brackets here. These could be little Simpson ties or concrete ties. And I think these can be screwed down to the 2 by 4 before we get to camp. And so you could just basically bring these bracketed 2 by 4s in the trailer and they could store that way year after year. And so into those ties, or those brackets, we're gonna put these posts. These are 4 by 4 posts. I've left them in this model at 96 inches, so 8 feet. We could cut them down to 7 feet, but I wouldn't go much shorter than that because then we'll lose a lot of headroom, especially when you hang the TVs up there. And I would definitely not go taller than 8 feet. And so attaching these posts to the bracket, we have a couple options. We could get a bracket that has a bolt hole through it, and I think a bolt is not a bad idea, but I also think that we're gonna wanna throw some screws into these posts. Just for extra shear strength. The wind is pretty gnarly out there, and I have to stand under this thing all weekend. So I know using screws is going to make disassembly a little slower, so we don't want to go crazy on screws, but there's a few other spots where I definitely think we're going to want to put some screws in this thing. And then obviously year after year, our posts will get a little weaker. We just need to put screws in different spots or rotate the posts. And so that's the post assembly. On these posts, we're going to put what I've just called jack studs. They're only 1 foot long, and they're gonna be 7.5 inches from the top of the post. And these are just 2 by 4s that we will laminate and screw onto 2 sides of each post. So the reason we're gonna put those there is it's gonna make our shear bracing flush. It's also going to just give us something to set these beams on. And so we'll start with the side beams. These are 8 feet long, and I've drawn them in as 2 by 8. So I think 2 by 8 is the right material here because we need to hang a lot on here, and the TVs give us quite a bit of weight. It also gives us more material here because what we're gonna do is we're gonna offset 2 bolts going this way, and then in our front beams, 2 bolts going this way. And so I have a 2 by 8 gives us more opportunity to do that. I'll show you the dimensions that I've drawn in here really fast. Basically, on a 2 by 8, you can go 3 inches and 6 inches from the top for the sides, and then 1.5 and 4.5 inches from the top on the front and back beams. And then I've also drawn in these countersinks. I definitely think that whatever bolts or lags, whether they're hex bolts or they're just normal deck lags that we want to use and bolt onto the posts, we're going to want to countersink those because we really need a flush face that lines up with these jack studs for our shear bracing. And so the way that Caleb and I did this 3 years ago is we just cut these triangles. This is an 18-inch square cut in a diagonal. So you make one 18-inch square, you get 1 corner. And we'll put those on the front and side and back of this entire apparatus. So this corner I've showed you is the same on the other 4 corners. And this is actually an extremely important part because these little triangle squares will shear this whole thing together, and the shear strength is really what we need for the wind. And this is the point where I say we really need to put quite a few screws into this structure. Screws obviously making disassembly a lot slower. We just don't need to go crazy on the screws, but there's not really a quick bolt-on shortcut we want to take with the wind. And so I think using screws for the shear triangle braces is important. And that's our stage. We can talk about materials, and I'll give you a cut list with all these dimensions in it, and print out a couple photos of this. But this is my recommendation for our HBC stage, especially at the Moore Creek location. And hopefully we can use this year after year if we build it in a way that we can reassemble. But we still have to bring the screws and the saws and everything out there just to make sure that this thing is built to fit. And I'll send this video to whoever needs it. But this is just a quick overview of the stage apparatus and structure that we're going to build for HBC 2024.